Jonathan was so angry that he wanted to take the first flight to Cuba and slit Matthew's throat. But he knew he had to stay calm. Ashley's life hung in the balance. His resolution to obliterate the powerful families of Cuba became even stronger. He took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "Okay, Matthew. I hope you send her back safely. I think you know what will happen if you don't." Matthew laughed. "Of course." The call ended, and Jonathan turned to Brock. "Ashley is my sister too. I'll make sure to bring her back safely. Go home now." Brock was livid, but he didn't dare attack Jonathan. Instead, he decided he would vent his anger on Latham. He told him to meet him outside, but Latham hid in Jonathan's villa, afraid to face Brock after learning his lesson earlier. Brock paced up and down for a few minutes before he gave up and left. That night, Latham stayed at the villa, but Jonathan ignored him. Eventually, Nancy arranged for the housekeeper to set him up in the guest room and give him a first aid kit for his injuries. Latham took the opportunity to pull Nancy aside before she left. "Do you think I've been a bad person?" She had a rough idea of what had happened between him and Ashley and looked at him sympathetically. "If you want to be a better person, you'll have to find a way to make it up to her." He leaned against the wall and reflected for a while. "You're right. I'm going to win her back." The following day, Latham quickly spoke to Jonathan about Ashley's situation before he left to visit his father in the intensive care unit at the hospital. Brock tried his best to find Latham and finish what they had started, but Latham evaded him. He hounded him for days to no avail. Matthew occasionally sent Jonathan videos of Ashley. She seemed to be in good spirits and was treated well. Although she stayed in a comfortable bungalow and enjoyed decent meals, she was still a prisoner and had no freedom of movement. Jonathan's relief that she seemed to be okay was overshadowed by the fact that Matthew didn't plan on letting Ashley go anytime soon, and he knew that he would have to confront the old man to rescue her and bring her back home safely. He also contemplated bartering his weak point in exchange for her freedom. He struggled to think of a speedy solution to the situation. The best he could do in the meantime was to have his trusted aides in Cuba find her location as quickly as possible. He sent the videos of Ashley to Brock, but in his anger, he blamed Jonathan, and they almost got into a fight. It was mid-August in New York City. The air had begun to grow cold, and the warm summer months had ended. Nancy had reached the final phase of the fertility treatments that she had started with Helga, and she would soon be able to try to fall pregnant. Ashley remained a prisoner in Cuba, and Brock eventually calmed down. On a beautiful autumn morning, Brock's fiancée Lindsay and her mother arrived in the city for a visit. As much as he didn't want to, Brock knew he had to keep to his end of the deal with Lewis and be a good host to them. Mrs. Pullman had wanted to give them some alone time, so she arranged to visit an old friend, leaving Lindsay behind with Brock soon after their arrival. Lindsay was an attractive young woman. She was tall and slender and had striking blue eyes. She was only 24 and had never been to New York City. Without her mother as a chaperone, she was excited to explore and looked forward to doing fun things with her fiancé. As they watched Mrs. Pullman leave, she turned to Brock with sparkling eyes. "I heard there's a specialty ice cream parlor on the city's south side. It's popular and trendy. Please, won't you take me there?" Brock frowned. "I don't like ice cream." Lindsay laughed playfully. "One would think you tried to be romantic and impress your fiancé. I suppose I'll have to tell your father you're not interested in showing me around." Brock shrugged. He didn't usually care for what his father thought, but things had changed. He had a duty to fulfill. If he didn't do as instructed, he'd be kicked out of Obsidian Industries again. Everything he had gone through would have been in vain. "Okay, let's go." He sighed and got up to leave. Lindsay paid no attention to his lackluster attitude. Instead, she used her phone to find the ice cream parlor's website and browse through the reviews. "Wow, This place looks amazing. They've got so many different flavors. She handed the phone to Brock. What's your favorite flavor? He glanced at the screen and handed the phone back to her. I won't have any. You can order whatever you want, and I'll pay. She didn't care about his cold response and scrolled through the menu. The chocolate truffle looks delicious, as does the mint. Maybe I should get both. The portions look huge, though. I don't think I'll be able to finish 2 by myself. Why don't you order the chocolate truffle, and I'll get the mint? That way we can share and get to taste both. Irritated, Brock agreed with her, hoping she would stop talking. Yeah, okay. Lindsay smiled happily. In that case, I think I'll order 3 different flavors. They reached the ice cream parlor, and Brock was surprised to find it was busy. They had to wait about 10 minutes before getting a table. Lindsay ordered 3 flavors, and Brock swiped his card to pay. While they waited, he scrolled on his phone and read the daily business news. They were eventually seated, and a waitress brought their order. Lindsay's eyes lit up as she first tasted the chocolate truffle ice cream. Oh, this is delicious! She had never tasted ice cream like that before. Go on, Brock. You have to try some. She pushed the bowl over to him. He ignored it and continued to look down at his phone. Not one to give up, Lindsay took a large scoop and pushed the spoon against his lips. What are you trying? He started to ask, but Lindsay took the opportunity and shoved the ice cream into his open mouth. At that exact moment, the door opened and a woman entered. He heard a familiar voice saying, I don't think there's an open table for us. He felt as if he had been shocked, and his gaze landed on Hannah. He still had the spoon in his mouth, and Lindsay smiled happily, unaware of his instant change in demeanor. His eyes were fixed on Hannah. Hannah glanced across the room, and their eyes locked briefly. She turned away and spoke to Ezra, standing behind her. It's fall. Let's rather go somewhere else. Just as she spoke, a waitress hurried over and explained that a table had just become available. She grabbed 2 menus and led them to an empty table that happened to be right next to Brock and Lindsay. Ezra casually followed the waitress to the table, and Hannah reluctantly followed. He sat down on the chair nearest to Lindsay, leaving Hannah with no choice but to sit on a chair next to Brock. She felt awkward and tried not to look at him. Their unexpected encounter at her parents' house had made her uncomfortable in his presence, and she no longer knew how to handle him. Ezra hadn't noticed anything and scanned through the menu. He was about to place his order with the waitress when he saw her eyes widen and heard her exclaim softly, Oh my word! You're Ezra! I can't believe it! He wanted to stop her, but it was too late. Ezra's band, Border City, had become very popular. Their music had hit the Billboard charts, and fans swooned over Ezra's rugged and handsome looks. The waitress squealed with excitement and attracted the attention of the patrons enjoying their ice creams. A group of girls rushed over. Please, can we take a photograph with you? One of the girls recognized Hannah and screamed excitedly. It's Hannah! We just love you. Your voice is amazing. Hannah blushed and didn't know what to do. Luckily, Ezra remained calm and stood up, smiling. Okay, everyone, let's take a photo. The girls giggled happily and chatted as they posed. He's so handsome. His voice is just dreamy. This is the best day of my life. I never thought I'd ever meet Ezra. The ice cream parlor was a popular hangout for teenagers, and soon, several girls had swooped in on Ezra and Hannah. He moved over to the counter at the front of the parlor and gestured for her to join him. When he saw that she didn't move, he called her. Hey, Hannah, come here. Let's take a picture together. Lindsay watched with interest, although she didn't know who Ezra and Hannah were. She guessed that they were celebrities, judging by the excited teenage girls who insisted on posing for photographs with them. In Brazil, her family was considered upper class and aristocratic, and she had seen many celebrities. However, her family was also conservative and strict. so she never had much opportunity to make a scene over someone famous, let alone have her photograph taken with them. She couldn't help herself from wanting to join the commotion. She pushed her chair back and stood up. Brock frowned. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to have my photo taken." She didn't wait for him to answer and excitedly hurried over to the crowd of girls. Brock's mood darkened, and he scowled as she walked away. He glared jealously at Ezra, who had his arm around Hannah. His rugged facial features made him look different from other handsome men. He was young and somewhat arrogant, but also very eye-catching. The waitress tried to contain the crowd and said she'd post the photos on the ice cream parlor's social media. Eventually, the excitement died down, and everyone returned to their seats. Ezra sat down and laughed. "It doesn't look like we can even sit and eat ice cream in peace." Hannah hadn't planned on going out with him. They had been working together close by, and she had felt like something sweet to eat. She had remembered that the ice cream parlor was just around the corner and had suggested they go there. They hadn't realized they were so famous among teenage girls, and they found the newfound fame difficult to handle. Another girl approached them and smiled shyly. "Ezra, my friends and I wanted to ask if you and Hannah are dating." Ezra shook his head and smiled. "Han? Oh no, we're just good friends." Brock's hair stood on end when he heard Ezra call her by her nickname. The girl blushed. "Oh, okay. We assumed you were dating because you looked so in love when you performed together. My friends and I think Border City is the best band ever. We're Border City fansies." Brock poked angrily at the ice cream with the spoon as he listened to the girl chat with Ezra and Hannah. He felt his blood boil and ate a mouthful of ice cream to calm himself down. "Border City fansies?" Ezra asked in surprise. The girl giggled. "Yeah, we've started a small fan club online. It doesn't have a lot of members yet, and it's mostly girls. They're going to be thrilled to hear that you're still single. And it's also okay if you're dating Hannah. She's cool." Ezra laughed lightly as the girl ran off to chat with her friends, and he began to talk to Hannah. Lindsay watched Brock stare at Ezra for a while before asking, "Do you also like Ezra?" She said his name loudly with her thick Brazilian accent, and it startled Ezra and Hannah. They both stopped talking and looked at her. Brock felt himself begin to blush at the attention she had drawn to them. "I don't know him." Lindsay continued, "I've just searched his profile online and discovered he's the lead singer of a popular band. They're doing a show tonight. I love going to shows, but never get a chance at home. Will you take me to see them tonight? Please?" She spoke loud enough for Ezra and Hannah to hear, but they didn't acknowledge her. Brock wanted to die from embarrassment. He couldn't take it anymore and stood up. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "I have to make a phone call. You can stay here and finish your ice cream. I'll wait for you outside." Lindsay glared at him. "What's wrong with you all of a sudden? Are you jealous of him? I didn't mean to make you think I like him more than I like you." He ignored her explanation and stormed out of the ice cream parlor, leaving Lindsay confused and alone. She looked at the uneaten ice cream and gritted her teeth before she hurried after him. Ezra turned to Hannah, puzzled. "Did they just fight because of me?" Hannah chuckled. "Don't worry about it. Maybe his fiancée is in awe of meeting a celebrity, and he's jealous." "How do you know they're engaged? Did they say anything?" Ezra seemed confused. Hannah suddenly realized Lindsay hadn't been wearing an engagement ring and felt slightly embarrassed. Outside the ice cream parlor, Lindsay found Brock talking to someone on the phone. She waited for him to finish his conversation before she approached him. "Sorry, Lindsay. Something urgent has come up. We have to go now." She was slightly disappointed, but she nodded and smiled at him. "It's okay. You can go. I'll walk around and browse through the quaint stores here for a while." Brock seemed unsure. He was worried about her being by herself. He wouldn't be able to explain if anything happened to her. I'll take a taxi, and my driver will escort you. Please check in with me regularly and return to the hotel before sunset." "Okay, see you later." Lindsay gave him a quick hug before turning away. It was almost sunset by the time Brock had finished his work. He had to sort out issues concerning his own company and had drunk a lot of wine with his clients. It was easier for him to negotiate new contracts due to his reinstatement at Obsidian Industries. He had met with several important executives, and they enjoyed drinking as much as they enjoyed making deals. He left the meeting with a pounding headache. As he walked down the street, a cool breeze blew through the autumn evening, bringing him out of his dazed state. He hadn't taken a taxi and had been walking for a long time. As he crossed another intersection, he noticed one of the buildings seemed quite familiar. He squinted and realized he had unwittingly walked to a townhouse he had bought before he had even met Hannah. He had hired a company to renovate it and had planned to stay there when the job was done. He had even hired an interior decorator to fit it out with the latest styles in furnishing and decor. But Hannah had left, and then Ashley had been taken to Cuba by Matthew. He didn't want to live there alone, so he hadn't moved in. Seeing Hannah that morning had made him realize that he wanted to be with her. But he was no longer in a position to do so. Ashley was trapped in Cuba, and he had to wait for Jonathan to find a way to rescue her. The sun had set, and he felt the darkness of the night creep into his heart. He felt like a failure. He had become engaged to Lindsay purely because of his father and to regain his stake in Obsidian Industries. Before that, he had been confident about making his own way through life. His right-hand man, Austin, was still in Brazil, handling business matters. He felt utterly alone, without friends, as if the whole world had abandoned him. He kept on walking to forget his loneliness. Eventually, tired and miserable, he stopped. He looked up and noticed he was outside a high-end private gentleman's club. He walked in and asked for a private lounge. The maitre d' realized that Brock was alone and called two pretty ladies to attend to him. The attractive women wore provocative outfits, and they smiled when they saw a handsome and well-heeled man to entertain. They led him to the private lounge and made him sit on a velvet couch. They brushed their soft arms against him as they served him wine. Seeing that he didn't react, they became bolder in their attempts to get his attention. One of the ladies slid onto his lap, but he pushed her away. He was heavy-handed in his drunken state, and the woman fell to the ground. She cried out in pain as she twisted her ankle. Brock didn't notice. He drank more wine, downing one glass after the other. The other woman brought him another bottle, spilling slightly as she refilled his glass. He looked at her through heavy eyes. "Go away," he shouted at her. He scowled at her and grabbed the bottle out of her hands. Frightened, she quickly helped the other woman up, and they hurried out of the room. Brock leaned against the couch, and the world around him spun. In a trance, he reached for his phone and dialed Hannah's number. Hannah hadn't planned to join Ezra's band. She had decided to find a new city to explore after the explosion, but Ezra had mentioned to her that they needed a backup vocalist, and she had happily agreed to help out once more, just like she had done in Riverside City. She had told her editor about the band, and surprisingly, he had supported her interest in music. She had decided to travel with the band on tour, and wrote about the different places where they had performed. It was another way for her to learn and write about the local culture of each town they had visited. She had deviated from her original plan and now wrote about the band on her public social media account. The fans had become hooked on her posts, and she and the band received much attention. In just over a month, she had toured with Border City to several places and had witnessed the growth of the band's popularity and the various nuances of popular culture. That afternoon, they had met with a record label and had been invited to dinner to celebrate the new deal. Hannah had decided to work on her column and didn't join the rest of the band. It was still early, and she had planned to return home by herself. Her parents weren't home, because they had gone to visit relatives in a small town up north, and they weren't due home until the next day. She had contacted one of her old high school friends who had invited her to her townhouse for a drink. Hannah initially hadn't wanted to visit her, even though they had been friends for a long time and hadn't seen each other for many months. But she couldn't turn her down when her friend requested a signed copy of the band's latest album. She happened to have a few copies in her bag from the meeting with the record label and decided to drop them off at her friend's townhouse on her way home. She took a taxi to the suburb where her friend lived. It was a cool autumn evening, and she wanted to enjoy the fresh air. So she asked the driver to drop her off a block away so she could walk for a while. It was then that she saw a familiar figure leaning against the wall. His shadow stretched across the sidewalk in the dim light of the streetlights. He seemed to be unwell. His head hung limply, and his eyes were half closed. He had loosened his collar, and his sleeves had been rolled up, revealing his strong arms. The way he leaned against the wall made him look more slender and taller. She hadn't expected to see Brock there. Unfortunately, there was no other way past him. She hesitated for a while before she eventually decided to walk past. He didn't notice, and she felt relieved. But she noticed his breathing sounded labored, so she turned around to see that he was okay. She saw him lean over and become violently ill. The smell of fermented alcohol and stomach acid burned her nose, and she frowned with disgust. In his drunken state, he didn't see her and continued to heave and throw up until he almost passed out. Hannah had lived with Brock when they had been married. Whenever he had been out with friends or clients, he had seldom drunk. If he had never returned home wasted. She had never seen him so drunk that he'd had to throw up. Seeing him in such a terrible state was a shock to her. She wanted to leave him and run away, but she couldn't move. She remembered the day he had saved her when she had almost drowned. He had carried her to her room and had arranged medication for her. He had once saved her life, and it seemed wrong to leave him sick and disoriented on the sidewalk. She bit her lips and reluctantly approached him. She found a small bottle of water in her bag and thought it would help him. She waited for him to catch his breath and handed him the bottle. He had stopped vomiting and put his hand against the wall to steady himself. He squinted at the water bottle and slowly turned his head to look at her. She subconsciously stepped back slightly, but held the water bottle out to him with a stretched arm. He took it from her and slowly unscrewed the cap. After taking a small sip, he rinsed his mouth before swallowing the rest of the water in one go. "Thank you." She watched him regain his balance before asking, "Are you okay?" He seemed to be in a daze as he looked at the mess on the sidewalk and then at her. Suddenly, he grabbed her arm and pulled her with him as he started to walk away. She tried to break free from his grip. "Stop! Don't pull me like that." He had been about to let her go, but when he heard her voice again, he tightened his grasp around her arm and dragged her to the front door of a nearby townhouse. Hannah began to feel frightened. "Let go of me! What are you doing? You can't break in here." He pulled a key out of his pocket and quickly unlocked the door before she could struggle free. Hannah was shocked. She suddenly remembered that he had told her about a townhouse that they would move into once the baby had been born. She realized that's where he had dragged her to. She had never been there while they were still married, as he had been renovating it. "You're drunk, Brock. Go inside and get into bed." "I can't stay. My friend is waiting for me." Hannah tried to struggle free, but as drunk as he was still much stronger than her. Her arm hurt from the tugging, and she couldn't break free. A moment later, he managed to pull her into the entrance hall and slam the door shut behind them. Terrified, Hannah began to panic, and she wished she hadn't approached him. There was a faint popping sound as Brock switched on the living room lights. Hannah gasped at the beautiful interior. It was an eclectic mix of modern and antique furniture and artwork. The decor had been tastefully done, and everything looked luxurious and new. She hadn't expected it to be so different from the minimalist simplicity of his apartment. Brock also seemed to be stunned by his home. He had forgotten how he had selected the best pieces sourced by his interior designer. At that stage, he hadn't known Hannah. He had planned to move away from his father, and the townhouse would have been his new home. But after what had happened with Hannah, losing the baby, getting divorced, and being kicked out of Obsidian Industries by Lewis, he had no longer wanted to live there. Hannah saw that he seemed in a daze, so she slowly slid her arm out of his grip and turned to leave. "I have to go now. I was on my way to meet an old school friend, and she's just messaged to find out where I am." "This was going to be our home. This was where we were going to raise our child." Brock slurred his words as he spoke. "I never came back here after you left." He sighed. "I'd forgotten about this place. If I hadn't come here tonight, I would never have remembered that I still have a home." Hannah had never seen Brock like this before. His voice was monotonous, like he had sunk into a deep depression. Suddenly, her phone rang, and she quickly answered it. "I'm on my way. I'll be there soon." She slipped her phone back into her purse and turned her back to him. He seemed immersed in his own world and didn't notice her walk away and open the front door. She breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, she felt an indescribable feeling wash over her. She took a deep breath and walked out. But as she closed the door, she heard something heavy crash onto the floor. Shocked, she waited a few seconds, but didn't hear anything else. Her heart sank as she turned around and returned to the townhouse, only to discover Brock lying motionless on the carpeted living room floor. Hannah rushed over to him. "Brock!" His eyes were closed, and she could see his chest rise and fall as he slowly breathed. She called out his name a few times, but he remained unresponsive. She tried to drag him toward the oversized couch, but he was too heavy for her. Her head began to ache. She looked around and quickly closed the front door. Then, she went to the kitchen to see if there was cold water to pour over him to wake him up. The kitchen was spacious and fitted with top-of-the-range appliances. A crystal chandelier hung above a heavy wooden table. The marble counter sparkled and shined. It was the kind of kitchen any woman would dream of having. Hannah shook her head and opened the cupboards until she found a cloth and a small bowl. She filled the bowl and walked back to the living room. Brock's eyes remained closed as Hannah dabbed his forehead with a wet cloth. It was cold and refreshing, and he soon came to. He touched the sore spot on his head and groaned. He then opened his eyes and got up with some difficulty, holding onto the couch for support. "Why don't you just stay here?" she urged. "You can sleep on the couch. I'll go find a pillow and a blanket." He stared at her with a dazed expression and then grabbed her and pulled her close. The move was so sudden that she hit her nose on his collarbone. She stiffened, wondering what to do. She could feel his heart pounding through the thin fabric of his shirt. His scent was incredibly familiar, though it had traces of alcohol and a woman's perfume. She pulled away. "Stop it, Brock. This isn't right." He reached out and hugged her even tighter, burying his face in her hair. "You smell so good. Don't push me away. Just let me hold you for a while." She could feel his breath on her, and she bit her lips, frozen to the spot. He hugged her for a long time before letting go. He gazed into her eyes and then pressed his forehead against hers, murmuring, "Let me show you around our new home." Her heart skipped a beat. He said, "Our home," she thought. He grabbed her hand, squeezed it, and took a step forward. His touch was warm and soft. "This is the living room." He waved his hand around with a flourish. She could tell he was still very drunk. "This couch is as soft as the bed," he continued. "And look over there on the wall. Do you see that oil painting? I commissioned a famous artist to paint it." She nodded, staring at the sailboat in the picture. It was floating on a sea of myriad colors, highlighted by the setting sun. She could see children playing on the shore in the distance. She glanced at Brock, who was obviously pleased with himself. He pointed at the fireplace. "What do you think of this? It's custom made." "It's beautiful." "Let's go see the kitchen and the dining room," he said, pulling on her hand. "I hired a very reputable interior designer. I wanted the house to feel modern but cozy." Hannah gasped when she saw the floor-to-ceiling window in the dining room. He smiled. "I knew you'd like it. I wanted a huge window to give the impression that we're eating outside, even when it's cold out. Wait till you see the enormous balcony upstairs. It even has a bar and fridge." They continued to the kitchen, which was just as impressive. She ran her hand along the smooth marble counter as he hugged her from behind. "It's all yours, but you don't have to cook if you don't want to. Maybe we can hire a part-time chef." Hannah felt stiffened by his affection and was at a loss for words. He was breathing in her ear now, sending shivers down her spine. The smell of alcohol on his breath was stronger than ever. She turned her face away and released herself from his grip, pretending to admire the kitchen cabinets. "Let's go upstairs," he said suggestively. "I saved the best for last." He led her to the stairs and stumbled on his way up. "I hope he doesn't fall," she thought worriedly. He took her to an empty room. "This is yours. You can use it for whatever you want to do. Paint, write, play an instrument. You like the piano and the guitar, am I right?" He looked at her meaningfully. She lowered her eyes and nodded. "Yes, I do. The carpet is beautiful, by the way. I'm going to buy you a grand piano, and you can play for me." He led her to another room. "This is my study. It's simple, but it'll do." He had already furnished it with a large mahogany desk and bookcases. She walked around slowly, stalling for time since she knew what came next. He took her hand, and they walked to the end of the hallway. Brock was grinning from ear to ear. "I present to you our master bedroom." She stopped just outside the door and peeked in. It was a large room that had been beautifully done up in a European style. She noticed that the mattress on the bed still had a plastic wrapper around it and wondered whether Brock had slept on it yet. She stuck her foot out and stepped on the light blue carpet. "Hansy, you can walk around the house barefoot all day if you want to," Brock said. "These carpets feel great, don't they?" She nodded. "Show me the other rooms." He took her to the guest room. "Your parents can stay here when they come and visit." "What about your father? How's he doing, by the way?" Brock frowned and replied coldly. "He's dead to me. He just uses me to get what he wants." She was stunned by his outburst and noticed the sad expression on his face. He's never talked about his family before, she thought. Maybe the alcohol is making him emotional. "He never cared about me," he continued. "I finally saw through him after all these years. I won't let him step foot in this house." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She knew his parents had separated, but she didn't think Brock's relationship with his father had deteriorated so much. She had always assumed he was a spoiled rich son who had had an extremely privileged childhood. He waved his hand to dismiss the topic and took her to another room. "This is Ashley's room. She can come and stay with us until she gets married. Or she and her husband can live here if they want to." He looked deep into her eyes. "You don't mind if my sister lives with us, will you?" She felt like it was a trick question, and she thought, if I tell him she can live here, he'll assume I'm moving in with him. If I say I mind, he'll think I'm nasty. Seeing Hannah hesitate, Brock caressed her cheek. "Ashley doesn't have much family, sweetheart. But if you don't want her to live here, perhaps we can agree on occasional visits, like twice a week." Hannah was speechless. His eyes burned into her, making her feel very uncomfortable. She finally shrugged. "I don't mind at all." He smiled and hugged her. "That's my girl. You're such a kind-hearted person, Hansy." She stiffened again and waited for him to let go of her. He's treating me like I'm his wife again, she thought. Brock didn't seem to notice her reaction and pulled her into another room. This will be our child's bedroom. If we have a few more, we can use some of the rooms on the upper floor. Hannah pursed her lips, thinking, a few more? How many kids does he want to have? He pointed to the staircase leading up to the third floor. There isn't much to see up there. The rooms are still empty. There's also going to be a gym, but the equipment hasn't arrived yet. Let's go see the terrace. They walked out through the sliding door. As you can see, it's enormous, he explained. There's a bar for entertaining over there, but I need to get an umbrella or something for shade. It gets really hot here in the summer. He pointed to the scenery below. Isn't this stunning? There's even an artificial lake over there and a park. We can take walks when the weather is nice. What do you think? The lights on the terrace were dim, and his face seemed to soften a little in the dimness. Hannah met his gaze and remained silent for a while. She finally said, This place is very beautiful, Brock. Before she knew what was happening, he grabbed her around the waist and kissed her hard on the lips. She was shocked and instinctively wanted to push him away, but felt she couldn't move. His lips pressed down on hers, and she could feel his warm breath on her face. She gasped, but then her body relaxed as she fell into his embrace. She could hear the sound of someone playing the violin in the distance. The music was soft and romantic in the dim lighting. Her heart was pounding, and she wondered whether they would end up in bed together that night. She pushed the thought aside, reminding herself that they were divorced and that he was drunk. She had already made up her mind not to get involved with him again. Their relationship had been a mistake from the beginning, and it would be an even bigger mistake to get back together now. She loved the new house and could picture herself living there, but she could never forget what she had overheard Brock saying. He had said that he never loved her and would never have married her if she hadn't been pregnant with his child. To top it all off, he's engaged to Lindsay, she thought. They'll probably get married soon. She suddenly pushed him away, catching him off guard. He stumbled back and crashed into the railing. She took the opportunity to run back inside. As she rushed down the stairs, her phone rang. She fumbled in her bag, found the phone, and answered. Hello? It was her friend. Where are you? I've been waiting for hours. You told me ages ago that you were on your way. Hannah was about to respond when she suddenly lost her balance and fell down the stairs. The phone flew out of her hand, and she landed on the floor with a loud thud. She cried out in pain, and Brock came running down the stairs a few seconds later. Hansie, what happened? Where does it hurt? She was in so much pain that she could barely speak. She pointed to her ankle. There, I think I sprained it. Brock picked her up and quickly carried her over to the couch. He sat down next to her and examined her foot. He gently put his hand on the red, swollen area of her ankle. Is this where it hurts? She nodded. Can you get my phone? I dropped it when I fell. He saw it lying a few feet away from the stairs, picked it up, and noticed that someone was on the line. Instead of giving the phone to her, he told the caller, She's busy. She'll call you back later. When Hannah's friend heard his voice, she immediately apologized. Am I speaking to Ezra? I'm sorry to have bothered you. I hope you two are having a great time. Give my regards to Hannah and tell her everything is okay here. Brock hung up and felt a wave of anger at hearing Ezra's name, but he controlled himself and returned to the couch. He took his phone out and called his assistant. Hi, I'm at the villa. Can you bring me a medical kit? I need some things for a sprained ankle. The assistant arrived a half hour later and rang the doorbell. Hannah was still lying on the couch, wondering what the assistant would think when she saw her there. But the latter came in, put the medicine kit on the table, and left without so much as a nod to her. Brock sat down and lifted Hannah's foot onto his lap. He then put some ointment on the sore spot and gently rubbed it in. It might hurt for a while, Just take it easy." "It's okay. I'm fine." She tried to get up, but the pain was unbearable. She fell back onto the couch, and he put his warm hand over her ankle again and rubbed it some more. It felt good, and she laid back, exhausted. She lowered her gaze to avoid his eyes. He held onto her foot, and she was surprised at how small and slender it was compared to his hand. She stared at the crystal chandelier on the ceiling and then at his face. He looked like a painting just then, merging with the light and shadows of the room. He looked deep into her eyes. "Does it still hurt?" he asked softly. Hannah blushed. "It hurts a little." "Don't worry," Brock replied. "The pain will go away eventually." He continued to massage her ankle and stood up after a while to stretch. Because he was drunk, he swayed and lost his balance. He grabbed onto the armrest for support, and she quickly sat up to support him and keep him from falling over. It was no use. He came crashing down on top of her, and she was caught between his heavy body and the soft couch. She had instinctively grabbed onto his shirt and was hugging him tightly. He became aware of how close their bodies were, and he leaned in even closer. Shocked, she tried to push him away, but her strength was no match for his. "What are you doing? Let go of me." Her heart was pounding, and she could barely breathe. "Stop struggling, Hansy. I just want to hold you in my arms." She wasn't a naive virgin, and she knew exactly what he wanted and how forceful he could be. If she fought back, he would only become more aggressive. She looked up at him. "You can hold me, but nothing more." "Okay, promise." He put his arms around her and held her close to his body. The couch wasn't big enough for two people, and she wished he would get off of her soon. "Hansy, don't date that singer," he whispered after a while. "Why not?" "Just wait for me. Give me some time." She scoffed. "Wait for what? For you to get married to that woman?" "I'm not going to marry her. I want you to be my wife." She was silent. "Give me some time," he repeated. "A year at most." "You're engaged, Brock. You shouldn't be doing this. Imagine how Lindsay would react if she knew what you were doing. She's a nice girl. Can't treat her like this." "I don't care about her. I want to kiss you." Hannah closed her eyes and turned her face away. "Don't. Just leave me alone. I worked so hard for this." His speech was becoming more slurred. She opened her eyes and looked at him. He seemed sad and lonely, and she suddenly felt sorry for him, for everything he had been through. A million thoughts raced through her mind as Brock lay on top of her. She remembered her father, who had been a hopeless drunk. After vomiting, he had always collapsed onto the bed and had fallen asleep almost instantly. Brock's breathing gradually slowed, and she heard him snoring a moment later. She wiggled around to free herself from his embrace, but he held her tightly. She remained still for a while and then tried again. She couldn't believe he was so overbearing, even while he slept, almost conscious of her movements. She finally gave up and nestled into a comfortable spot on the couch. She breathed in the scent of his skin and recalled the brief period during which they had been happy in their marriage and had cuddled in bed until they fell asleep. It felt like ages ago. Hannah was confused about her feelings. All she knew was that his body was warm, and she eventually fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up the following morning, her memory was fuzzy, and she couldn't remember where she was. She looked around and suddenly gasped. She had been planning on sneaking away while Brock was asleep at night, but she had passed out in his arms instead. She heard his steady breathing and wondered how she would face him when he woke up. She reached out to lift his arm, but as soon as she touched him, he woke up with a start and coughed. What is it?" His voice was low and hoarse. Hannah's heart started pounding. It was a false alarm. He closed his eyes and went back to sleep. She was furious. How long am I supposed to stay in this position? She wondered. I have to get out of here. She decided to try again, and she gently lifted his arm. She then wiggled out from underneath him and struggled to the floor. Just when she thought the coast was clear, Brock opened his eyes and looked straight at her. She froze. His face was so close that she could feel his breath on her. He looked dazed for a moment, but then grinned at her. So it really is you, Hansy. Thought I was dreaming last night. Did we fall asleep in each other's arms? She didn't say anything and moved to get up, but he grabbed her arm and pulled her on top of him on the couch. He sighed happily and hugged her. She felt so helpless that she wanted to cry. I'm so glad I brought you here so you could see our new home, he whispered, brushing the hair away from her face with his hand. My wish has finally come true. We're going to be together again. He kissed her then, thinking how wonderful it was to have her in his arms after all that time. She balled her hands into fists and willed herself not to burst into tears. Hannah could barely breathe. She was furious with Brock, who was completely oblivious to her lack of affection toward him. He continued to kiss her passionately. Her ankle was still sore, so she had no strength to fight him off. She just lay on top of him as his arms tightened around her body. Just as he lifted her blouse, they heard the shrill sound of the phone ringing. Brock tried to ignore it, but it rang persistently. Irritated, he finally got up from the couch and grabbed his phone off the coffee table. It was Lindsay's mother, Miranda. Good morning, Brock. I'm just checking to see whether you'll be at the office today. If so, Lindsay would like to go with you. He scratched his head and frowned. Yes, of course. Good. I'm flying home today, but she'll stay for a few more days. Take good care of her for me. I will, Miranda. I'll send someone to take you to the airport. He wished her a good trip and turned to Hannah, who was smoothing her clothes and getting ready to leave. He noticed that she looked at him with the same cold expression as the previous day. He pointed to her ankle. Does it still hurt? No, she replied decisively. She didn't want to admit that she was still in pain because she wanted to avoid his advances. She wondered whether he remembered all the things he had said last night or whether it had been the alcohol talking. It doesn't matter, she thought. He's engaged whether he likes it or not. There's no backing out now. He needs to honor his commitment and leave me alone. She wished she had just left him there last night instead of giving him water and making sure he was okay. Hansy, I don't have anything to eat since I haven't moved in yet, and I'm not sure if they do food deliveries here, Brock said apologetically. We can go and get something if you want. She shook her head. I'm not hungry, thanks. I have to go home and change. I'm late for work. She limped toward the door, trying her best to ignore the pain in her ankle. Brock came up behind her and lifted her before she could protest. I'll drive you. You're in no condition to walk. The night before, when his assistant had brought the medical kit over, he had also asked her to arrange for one of his cars to be sent there. He carried her out the door and walked over to the street with large strides. He then put her in the passenger seat of his car and bent over to fasten her seatbelt. Their hands touched, and Hannah quickly pulled away. He smiled, pinched her cheek, and fastened the seatbelt. His face was close to hers, so she could smell the faint scent of his cologne. Hansy, where are you staying these days? He asked. With my parents. There's no point in getting an apartment here. I travel around writing columns, so I rarely come to New York. She was annoyed when she realized she had missed the deadline for her last column because she had spent the night with him. Brock drove her to her parents' neighborhood and parked the car in the underground garage. He got out, walked over to her side, and gathered her in his arms. They had barely gone a few steps when he felt her stiffen. He followed her gaze and saw her parents approaching. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, Hannah said nervously. Her parents eyed them suspiciously. Hannah knew they were shocked to see her in Brock's arms, wearing the same clothes from the day before. "Hi, Mom and Dad," Brock said, attempting to make light of the situation. Hannah's mother was horrified. "How dare you address us like that?" Mr. Marsh demanded angrily. "You're not our son-in-law anymore." Hannah wished the ground would swallow her up. She pulled at Brock's sleeve. "Put me down." He ignored her and spoke to her parents. "She sprained her ankle yesterday. I just wanted to get her home safely. Can I take her inside?" Mrs. Marsh rushed over to them and examined her daughter's foot. "How did this happen? Did he hurt you?" Brock was dismayed. It seemed that the impression he had made on them long ago was still deeply rooted in their memories. "I fell down the stairs," Hannah explained in a low voice. "It was an accident. It wasn't his fault." "I don't believe you," her mother said. "He does nothing but hurt people. You should stay away from him. Why don't we help you to the house?" "Brock, put me down," Hannah repeated. He refused to listen and carried her over to the elevator. "This is ridiculous," he thought, fuming. "Do they think I kidnapped their daughter and beat her?" Mr. and Mrs. Marsh followed behind. Brock pushed the elevator button and they all got in. They stood in awkward silence, looking at their reflections in the large mirror as the elevator took them to their floor. Mr. Marsh turned to Brock when they got out. "We can take it from here. You can go now." But Brock hung on to Hannah stubbornly. "I'd like to take her inside if you don't mind." Mrs. Marsh sighed and opened their front door. Brock put Hannah down and handed her the ointment. "Here, this will help alleviate the pain. Applied in the morning and the evening." She nodded without saying anything. "You can go now, Brock," Mrs. Marsh said coldly. "You're not welcome here. I hope we never see you again." He clenched his fists and remained quiet, afraid of saying something that he would regret later. He knew they still blamed him for a lot of what had gone wrong in their relationship, and they considered him a loser. He straightened himself. "Well, goodbye then." He heard the door slam behind him as he went out. Inside, Hannah lowered her eyes to avoid facing her parents. Mrs. March was sympathetic, though, and smiled gently at her. "Have you had breakfast, dear? I have your favorite bread and pastries." "Thanks, Mom. I'm starving." "Good. I'll be right back." Her mother went straight to the kitchen, and Hannah sat back and breathed a sigh of relief, happy to be back home. She had no idea Brock was standing outside their building, staring up at their living room window longingly. Brock's phone vibrated as he was standing outside the Marshes building. He checked it and saw that Jonathan had sent him a video of Ashley in Cuba. He watched it and laughed, forgetting about Hannah momentarily. Jonathan was in Brussels. Ever since he had taken over the Davidsons' overseas business, he had been working non-stop. He looked at the calendar in his office and noted that Nancy would still have to take her fertility medication for another 3 days. He became excited at the possibility of becoming a father. "I'll ask Helga to examine her when I get back," he thought. "If everything's okay, maybe she can finally get pregnant." He turned to Jack. "Can you shuffle my meeting so I can return home a day early?" Jack looked at his packed schedule and shook his head. "It's going to be difficult. Why don't you take it easy? You'll get tired if I cram everything into one day." Jonathan patted him on the shoulder. "You'll understand when you're married. Some things are more important than work." Jack frowned, wondering why his boss didn't appreciate his concern. "Okay, I'll try my best," he said. "You have drinks with a client this evening. I'll see if I can fit in a dinner with another client. Tomorrow you have quite a few video conferences. Maybe we can postpone some of them." He droned on, but Jonathan barely heard him. He just smiled and nodded in agreement. "Jack, I noticed that one of our clients has a very beautiful daughter. How old do you think she is?" Do you think she's old enough to go on a date with you? He teased. Don't make fun of me, sir. I know I'm still single, but I don't have time to go on blind dates. Are you saying I overwork you? Jack immediately regretted his words. Absolutely not. No one works as hard as you. Jonathan tapped his fingers on the desk. You need to find a woman. If I could, you can. Jack had no idea why he was picking on him that day, but he smiled politely. You could because you're a powerful, talented CEO. Jonathan laughed and waved him away. Get back to work. After his assistant left, he checked his phone and saw a message from Nancy. Our gaming company is doing well. You and Steve should relax. We have talented people working with us. By the way, Jack is very popular with the ladies here. They all keep saying they miss him and want him to come back. Nancy had no idea how much harm she had caused Jack. It was evening. She had just taken a shower and was getting ready to go to bed when her phone vibrated. She picked it up and saw a message from one of her colleagues in the company's chat group. Player's Journey just launched a new gaming app. Its design looks very similar to the one we're about to release. The message was accompanied by a few screenshots and a short video of the game. The series of angry messages from other colleagues followed. It's not very similar. It's an exact replica of our game. This is an outrage. They stole our idea. Nancy's heart sank, and she clicked on the video. They were right. The game's background and scenes were exactly like the ones that Dorian had designed. She had given him all the credit and had even praised him for his outstanding work. She shook her head, wondering how their competitor had gotten hold of their designs. They've already released the game, which means we can't launch ours. Otherwise, we'll be seen as copying them, she thought with dismay. She sent a quick message to the group. Be at the office in a half an hour for an emergency meeting. Make sure our PR agency is there. She then called Xavier and told him what had happened. She thought he deserved to know, because he also had some shares in the company and was now managing it since Jonathan was busy with his other work. I'll be at the meeting, he assured her. The team gathered in the big conference room of the Brightstar office. They all started giving their input. The man who had originally messaged went first. Player's Journey officially launched their game earlier today, so I downloaded it out of curiosity. Imagine my shock when I discovered that its design is the same one as the one we developed. A woman nodded. I also downloaded it and checked it out on my way over here. It's very similar to ours. There are some subtle differences. Our scene design is more detailed and user-friendly. I reckon they got a hold of ours and quickly changed a few things so they could launch their game ahead of us. Maybe that's why it isn't perfect. They were in a rush. Why don't we hear what the person in charge of the scene design team has to say? Nancy suggested. One of the men stood and cleared his throat. He turned red with embarrassment. That would be me. I can assure you that we didn't leak any information to our competitor. She nodded and then looked at Dorian. It wasn't me, he said defensively. A woman pointed an accusing finger at him. I saw you having lunch with a few people from the game industry the other day. Are you sure you didn't leak something? Dorian jumped out of his seat. Why would I? I met with them to get some insider information. The woman was equally upset. Is that so? Then how did our competitor find out about our scene design? Nancy rolled her eyes and sighed impatiently. She suspected that Player's Journey had planted a corporate spy inside their company and that they probably had ties to Cuba. I wonder if Alexander had something to do with this, she thought. Maybe he wants revenge. Jonathan owns Brightstar after all. She was still puzzled by how their company had almost gone bankrupt because of Obsidian Industries' actions. Both Jonathan and Xavier were experienced businessmen and knew how to manage a company, and it was strange that things had gotten bad so quickly. Nevertheless, she was determined to find out who was behind the most recent disaster. "What if we don't find the person responsible for this?" someone asked. "What's going to happen to our new game?" Peter, who had been silent up to then, spoke up. "This is an outrage. This is a no-win situation. Our game is due to launch next week, but we won't be able to create a new set of scenes in such a short time. If we postpone the launch, we'll suffer huge losses due to the tons of money we've already invested, including our ad spots and the PR event we organized. I don't see how we're going to solve this." "I agree," the marketing department head declared. "We've already created a huge hype around the launch. Our players are really looking forward to trying out our new game. If we let them down, they'll just go over to our competitors, and they may never come back." Nancy nodded and silently contemplated what Peter had said. It was a serious problem that could ruin Brightstar's sterling reputation. Although she and Jonathan were successful and wealthy, Brightstar was her venture, and she wasn't willing to let it fail. Xavier, who hadn't said a word, cleared his throat before looking at Peter. "Do we have any evidence that shows when we created our scene design? Something like a timestamp?" Peter shook his head. "No, we don't keep that type of historical information, because apart from the data taking up too much space, several improvements are made once the first scene is integrated into the game. We can only see the current date and time." It was standard practice for gaming developers to limit the amount of historical data stored. Unless there was concern about the integrity of the data, it was unnecessary to keep backups. It was evident that players' journey knew this. It was a challenging situation for Brightstar, and nobody in the meeting spoke for several minutes. Xavier suddenly looked at Dorian. "Who did you have lunch with that day? Do you have any pictures of all of you together?" Dorian took his phone out of his pocket and passed it to Xavier. "It was just a small group of friends." Xavier looked through some photographs in Dorian's camera roll. His gaze landed on a person, and he pointed to him. "Who's this guy? What's his name?" "Him? He's just a computer geek. He goes by the name of Caviar. He's excellent at sports gaming, and he's quite popular online. You don't think he's involved, do you?" Xavier ignored him and turned to Nancy. "I've seen this guy somewhere before." Nancy's eyes widened. "When?" Xavier shook his head in disbelief. "I've seen him in one of Gavin's photos." When Xavier had pretended to have lost his memory, Carter had shown him some photographs in the hope that he would remember something. One of the photos had been of Gavin and some of his friends, and Caviar had stood in the background. Nancy scowled, and she glared at everyone in the room. Dorian looked confused, and Michael, one of Brightstar's marketing executives, looked down at his phone to avert her gaze. She took a deep breath. "We have only 1 week before our launch date. It's too late to redesign everything. All we can do is stick to the plan and find evidence to prove that Player's Journey plagiarized our work." She then turned to the head of the public relations company they had hired to handle the launch. "Now that you know the situation, you must be on standby for any last-minute changes we need to make." She closed her folder and excused everyone from the meeting except for Dorian. "You better tell me everything that happened that day you had lunch with your friends." Xavier stood up and walked out at the same time as Michael. It was dark outside, and the traffic was heavy. Eventually, Xavier arrived in his neighborhood and parked outside his apartment building. He was surprised to find Michael there and narrowed his eyes when he saw him. Michael smiled politely. "Xavier, I didn't know you lived in this neighborhood." He glanced around and didn't notice any security cameras. He clutched a knife close to his side as he approached Xavier. Xavier took a step backward. "I was just thinking about it and wanted to ask you something. Aren't you and Caviar roommates?" He had checked the IP address of Caviar's live broadcast while he had waited in the traffic. Michael smirked. "You're smart, but not smart enough. You should know how we Cubans handle certain situations." He hadn't intended to kill anyone, but the opportunity suddenly seemed to present itself. With Xavier out of the picture, Carter would allow Gavin back into the family. Even if Gavin took on Oliver, he was sure that Oliver wouldn't do anything to affect his relationship with Esther. Xavier stayed calm. "Yeah, I know how you Cubans operate. So, how long have you been planning this for?" Michael sneered. "It's no use trying to buy time now. No one is going to come and save you." Suddenly, someone appeared out of the shadows. He wore a mask and had a murderous look in his eyes. Xavier immediately knew it was Caviar. While Caviar had made a name for himself as an online gaming legend, he also moonlighted as a professional assassin. Caviar scoffed. "Enough with the small talk. I don't feel like being here all night." He suddenly lunged toward Xavier, but before he could reach him, another man blocked his attack. It was Norman. He was wearing a black vest that revealed his strong, muscular arms. Caviar stepped back, astonished. Norman wasted no time and started to attack him, causing Caviar to panic. An idea flashed through Michael's mind as he watched the two men fight. He wasn't a proficient fighter, but he had a knife, and he was sure he could kill Xavier if he caught him off guard. So he pretended to rush forward to help Caviar. But as soon as he moved, he felt an agonizing pain in his chest. Shocked, Michael turned around to see that Xavier had attacked him with lightning speed. Xavier held a dagger with a long blade in his hands. It was the same dagger that he had bought at the auction. It had been made by a renowned bladesmith and was so sharp that it cut like a hot knife through butter. Since the incident with Gavin, Xavier had always carried it with him for protection. Xavier felt that he could either allow himself to be the victim or take control and defend himself. He had stabbed Michael in the chest. When he looked down, he saw blood dripping from the wound. Without hesitating, he yanked the dagger out and felt hot blood running over his hands as it gushed out of the gaping wound. A pool of blood gathered around Michael's feet. Xavier's heart began to pound. He had never killed anyone before, but would have been bleeding to death on the sidewalk if he hadn't defended himself. Michael looked down at the wound in disbelief. He felt his body grow cold. He glared at Xavier and stuttered as blood began to drip from the corners of his mouth. "How dare you!" He slowly fell onto his knees before slumping forward into a messy heap. Xavier grimaced. Everyone has their limits. He had endured enough violence in his lifetime. He had suffered at the hands of Gavin and the other powerful Cuban families. He could no longer be passive. He had to protect himself and his family. Norman had successfully taken Caviar down and was about to deal him a fatal blow when Xavier stopped him. "Wait, let's keep him alive for now." Caviar screamed in pain as Norman twisted his arms behind his back and pushed him onto the sidewalk. He quickly restrained him and pulled his phone out of his pocket. All arrange for someone to clear this mess up. A small crew arrived within minutes with cleaning materials and a body bag. They quickly cleaned the area and removed Michael's body. By the time they had finished, it was impossible to tell that something sinister had happened there, and everything looked normal. Xavier and Norman left with their hostage. As they drove away, Xavier quickly called Nancy. When she heard what had happened, she breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you, cousin." It was the first time she had ever called Xavier that, and it took him by surprise. He laughed. "I never thought the day would come that I'd hear you call me that." Without missing a beat, Nancy replied, "I'm just excited to have Esther as part of my family." Xavier chuckled. "I'll tell you more about what happened and what Caviar says once we've interrogated him. What's news on your side?" Nancy had suspected Dorian and had decided not to leave the office when Xavier and the others had left. Instead, she had instructed Dorian to stay behind with her. Even though he seemed innocent, he was still Alexander's brother, and she couldn't be too careful. Hearing about Caviar relieved her because she no longer had to worry about Dorian. "I'm glad he has nothing to do with this," she explained to Xavier. Xavier shrugged. "Yeah, get some rest now. We have a busy week ahead of us. Once you've settled everything, you should go spend some time with Esther. I hope I didn't disturb anything between the two of you when I called the emergency meeting." He knew what she was hinting at, and he laughed helplessly. "Now I know why the two of you get along so well. You're like two peas in a pod." Nancy smiled. "All right, I'll stop teasing you." "When are you going to Cuba again?" Xavier asked. She knew he was asking because of the wedding they still had to have in Cuba. "We have another important release date scheduled for next month. How about afterward?" Xavier nodded. The new game was top secret, and Brightstar had been preparing to shock the entire gaming world. Dorian had been standing outside Nancy's office and had overheard the entire conversation. He swung the door open and began to yell at her. "Did you suspect me for leaking the designs?" Nancy remained calm. "Yes, I did. I'm sure you know why." Dorian frowned and scowled. "It's just because of my family relations? You don't seem to notice all the effort I've put into the game? How could you possibly think that I would collude with those people? Why would I leak the designs to our competitors? You must think I'm pathetic." Nancy watched the young man burst with anger, and she almost began to laugh. He was nearly 26 years old, but still highly impulsive. She waited for him to rant and rave until he couldn't anymore. When he had finally had his say and had calmed down, she smiled gently. "Do you have any plans for tonight?" He looked at the floor and ignored her. "Good. I take it that you have nothing on. So how about I treat you to dinner? There's something I'd like to give you." He was still too angry to respond, so she casually stood up and left the room. She smiled when she saw Rose waiting for her. "Rose, let's go have supper." Rose, who had been busy with matters concerning her club, grinned eagerly. She had been appointed as Nancy's bodyguard and accompanied her whenever she went out at night. "Great idea. Why don't you come over to my place? My housemates have invited some friends over who are chefs. They've promised us an amazing culinary experience. You'll love it." Nancy nodded. "That sounds great." She was starving. The long hours had exhausted her, and she hadn't had a chance to eat yet. Dorian stood in the hallway and stared at the two women angrily. He was cross with Nancy and didn't want to have dinner with her, but he was even angrier that she had decided to have dinner with someone else. As she was about to leave, he rushed over to her. "Didn't you just promise to treat me to dinner? You're so insincere. I knew it. You and that girl." Rose suddenly turned to face him. "Who are you calling a girl?" Although she was still fresh-faced and had only recently started university, she had a sharp wit. Dorian scoffed. "You, obviously. You're still wet behind the ears." Suddenly, he felt a gust of wind rush past him, and before he knew it, he spun through the air and landed on the floor with a painful bump. He clasped his burning cheek. He realized that Rose had slapped him across the face and flipped him over, all in one swift move. Not one to lose face so easily, he quickly got to his feet, ready to retaliate. Nancy stopped him with her arm. "Think carefully. Rose may be young, but she's an extremely proficient fighter. I recently appointed her as my bodyguard." Dorian paused and reconsidered. Rose terrified him. He quickly mumbled a feeble excuse to divert the attention. "You said you'd treat me to apologize for suspecting me, but then you decided to have dinner with her instead." Nancy grinned. "Okay, let's go then. Which restaurant do you have in mind?" Still upset, Dorian glared at her angrily. Nancy arrived home after a long evening. Although it had been such an eventful night, it almost felt like there had been nothing to worry about in the first place. She felt confident that they would get the evidence they needed, and that Brightstar wouldn't have to replan any aspect of their marketing campaign. 3 days passed by in the blink of an eye. Nancy sat in the dining room with Jacob. She was preparing the last dose of her medication when she heard a key turn in the front door's lock. It was Jonathan. who had finally returned home. "Nancy, my darling, I hope that's your last dose." He took his shoes off and scrunched his face when he caught the whiff of the bitter medicine. Nancy smiled warmly. "I thought you'd only be back after tomorrow." He went into the kitchen to get some honey for her to take away the bitter taste of the medicine. When he returned, he nuzzled her neck and spoke in a low voice. "I'll tell you why I came back so early." Nancy looked at Jonathan, speechless. Puzzled, Jacob asked, "Yeah, tell us. Why did you come back so early?" Jonathan turned to Jacob. "I think you know what I mean. Go to your room and do your homework." Nancy glared at Jonathan. "You can't speak to him like that." Jonathan raised his eyebrows and stared at Jacob. "But he knows what I'm trying to say." Jacob quickly realized he had to leave the room before he would have to explain himself. "I don't know anything." He blushed a deep shade of red and hurried out of the room. Nancy's eyes went wide with shock, and she turned to Jonathan. "If there's anyone to blame for corrupting him, it must be you." He looked at her innocently. "It's not me. It's New York City." He watched her stir the powdery medicine into a glass of water and drink it in one sip. When she put the empty glass on the table, he quickly shoved a spoon of honey in her mouth. Before she could swallow, he sealed her lips with a passionate kiss. As their lips touched, she tasted an explosion of sweetness and bitterness in her mouth. He grabbed her around her waist and pressed her against the table. She clutched his shirt, somewhat vexed. "Don't get so excited." Jonathan groaned. "I can't help it." He kissed her again as he began to unbutton her blouse. She grabbed his wrist. "Wait, we're still in the dining room." He pulled his hand free and ignored her. "Let's go to the bedroom," she pleaded, but her words fell on deaf ears. He pushed her onto the table and slowly slid his hands up her skirt. Suddenly, she pushed him away. He pulled her back, but noticed she seemed hesitant. "What's wrong?" he asked, confused. She shook her head. "I'm sorry. I think it's that time of the month." Jonathan felt like someone had poured a bucket of ice over him. "Are you sure?" She smiled gently. "I'm sure." He didn't know what to say, so he let her go and watched her hurry out of the dining room. He sighed and went to the bathroom, where he straightened his disheveled clothes and rubbed his temples. He was tired, his head ached, and he felt disappointed. He had rushed home and had been looking forward to a passionate moment of intimacy with his wife. Nancy knocked on the bathroom door and entered. "I'm not mistaken. It's the start of my next cycle." He sighed. "Okay, I'm just tired. I've been on a plane for over 10 hours and haven't slept for about 20 hours. She didn't know whether to laugh at him or feel sorry for him. "Helga said we must be careful, but I don't think we need to worry so much anymore. Why don't I run you a nice hot bath?" He pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. He had to accept that even though he had worked long hours to get home earlier, it was more important for Nancy to be healthy if they were to start a family. He squeezed her one last time. "It's fine. I'll take a shower." The next day was Saturday, and Jonathan and Nancy visited his mother at the Davis estate. Helga was busy reading up on new medical treatments when she saw the two of them approach. She took one look at Nancy and smiled. "You finished taking your medication. Come here. Let me take your pulse." Nancy quietly obeyed and held her wrist out for Helga. The doctor counted slowly and smiled happily when she finished. "Everything seems fine now. I think you're ready to have a baby." Nancy grinned. "Do you remember that I asked you if I would be able to conceive twins?" Helga smiled gently. "Of course. I have a few remedies you can try." Jonathan watched as Nancy and Helga chatted quietly, but his curiosity got the better of him. "What are you two talking about?" Nancy blushed slightly and looked away. "It's confidential." She didn't want to tell him she hoped to have twins. She wanted to surprise him. Relieved that Nancy could finally try to fall pregnant, they enjoyed a pleasant lunch with his mother. 3 days later, Brightstar released their new game called Galaxy Fortune. It was the type of game that both men and women could enjoy because it had been designed so the women could fall in love and their male counterparts could build a world they could expand in many different ways. It was the day of the launch, and Nancy had arranged for the press conference to be held in Brightstar's largest conference room. The company had invited major media outlets, social media influencers, and gaming celebrities. The press conference kicked off positively, and everything ran smoothly. The large screen displayed a digital countdown timer, and the game's promo began after the countdown time rolled over to 0. But within 10 seconds, the guests began to whisper among themselves. "This looks the same as the design by Player's Journey." "You're right, it does. What's going on here?" "Do you think Brightstar is so arrogant that they would blatantly plagiarize Player's Journey?" "It can't be, unless that's why Player's Journey changed their release date to earlier." One of the gaming reporters took out their phone and started to read. Here's a post on Player's Journey's website, written by one of their officials, Red Hawk. It says, "We've discovered that our database has been hacked, and someone accessed the design for our new game. We were worried that the hackers would release the design, so we brought our release date forward by a week. We'll improve on any glitches experienced by our loyal supporters when they play the new game." Another reporter seemed shocked. But didn't Player's Journey once say they were openly copying Brightstar? The first part of the promotional video had finished playing, and only a still of one of the scenic designs remained projected. The artwork was exceptional, and the landscape seemed hyper-realistic. The reporters had to know the truth. One of them called out to Peter. "Brightstar's new game and Player's Journey's game that was released last week have identical designs. Did Brightstar copy Player's Journey?" Dorian felt his blood boil. He sat backstage and listened to a reporter publicly suggest that Brightstar had plagiarized Player's Journey. He wanted to rush onto the stage and yell at all of them. He was the one who sat up night after night perfecting the design. He wanted to set the record straight. In all his life, he had never had to put effort into anything. When he had finally taken the initiative to do something properly, the first response was that he had copied someone else's work. Peter pulled him back before he had the chance to say anything. "Calm down. If you rush out there, you'll make a fool of yourself. They won't believe a word you say unless you have the evidence to back it up." Dorian stuttered and stammered. He was so angry that the veins on his forehead began to protrude. Peter let go of his grip. "Fine, go ahead and say something, but if you ruin Nancy's plan, you alone will take the responsibility for it. Don't say I didn't warn you." Dorian hissed angrily. He had already decided not to face the reporters. "Yeah, okay, but she's still younger than me." Peter shrugged and looked down at the notification on his phone. He had sent Ashley a few messages under his gaming name, Galaxy, but she hadn't replied. When he had asked Nancy about her, she had said that Ashley had decided to go on holiday. He had guessed as much after having overheard the conversation between Helga and Ashley that day next to the stream when they had all gone hunting. He had noticed the animosity between Ashley and Latham and had found out later that Latham had been engaged to someone. It turned out that Latham's wedding had been canceled, and Peter assumed that Ashley's departure had had something to do with that. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and took a deep breath. He didn't have time to think about Ashley. He had a press conference and serious allegations to focus on. Nancy stood on the stage and smiled faintly as the reporters hounded her with questions. "Thank you, everyone. We'll take your questions once we've completed our presentation." The reporters grumbled and fell silent. Nancy had hired a few famous singers for the event, and everyone cheered up as one of the singers took to the stage. A few Brightstar fans downloaded Galaxy Fortune and realized the game played flawlessly. It was much better than StarQuest, the player's journey game. Although the design seemed the same, Galaxy Fortune's scenes were more realistic and detailed. The diehard fans decided Player's Journey must have copied Brightstar, not vice versa. The internet buzzed with news about Brightstar's new game, and the possibility that they had copied another gaming developer began to trend online as a hot topic. Player's Journey had secretly hired a group of gamers to comment in their favor, and the comments on social media were mainly one-sided, branding Brightstar as shameless. Some commentators even attacked Nancy, saying that she had only become head of the company because of Jonathan and that she was destroying Brightstar. The negative comments flourished and went viral, to the point where it seemed as if Brightstar's reputation had taken a severe blow. Everyone on Brightstar's side of the argument lamented that nothing was sacred anymore, and that even television shows plagiarized one another. But in the conference room, Nancy continued promoting their game as if the online chatter didn't exist. Finally, the presentation ended, and it was time for the questions and answers session to begin. Nancy skimmed over the download statistics and was pleasantly surprised to see that the game had gone viral, and the download counts had already exceeded the previous game they had launched. It had been a smart move on her behalf to invite celebrities and gaming influencers to the press conference because their endorsement or disapproval had reached thousands of people. There's no such thing as bad publicity, she thought and smiled to herself. The question of plagiarism soon became the most asked question. Nancy calmly stood her ground. Regarding whether we copied another gaming developer's design, I want to share the following video with you. The screen lit up and projected a still image of a meeting between Caviar and the executives from Player's Journey. Caviar had a memory stick in his hand and was reaching over to an executive to give it to him. A voice recording began to play over the speakers. Most people recognized the voice as Caviar's. They had heard his live broadcasts before. Here's the design. I suggest you move your release date forward by a week. You want to destroy Brightstar, don't you? Another voice interjected. But what's in it for you? Caviar laughed. Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The other voice paused momentarily. Is this because Peter defeated you in the championships a while back? The still image changed, and a video of Michael entering Brightstar's design department began to play. Michael put a memory stick into Peter's computer and quickly downloaded something before sneaking out of the room again. Nancy gestured for the video to be turned off. After investigating the matter, we discovered that one of our marketing executives shared an apartment with the man in the still image. After the matter came to light, we also discovered that the executive disappeared. He's nowhere to be found. She looked at the astonished reporters. I believe the truth has been revealed. Thank you for coming to our press conference today. I also want to thank my team for their exceptional dedication and hard work in making Galaxy Fortune a reality. And now, I invite everyone to join us for some refreshments in the foyer. Peter stepped out onto the stage and made a short announcement. It's true that I beat Caviar in the championships a few years ago. Here's a recording of the game we played. A few inquisitive reporters hurried over to take a look. Although Caviar was a professional assassin, he couldn't cope with being locked up in a dark basement without food or water for almost a week. Eventually, he cracked and told Xavier everything there was to know. Nancy had smiled happily when Xavier had sent her a message telling her about Caviar's confession. But although Caviar had confirmed that a powerful Cuban family had been behind the matter, he had been unable to explain why. Peter knew they would have to wait for Jonathan to take control of the powerful families that ruled Cuba before the whole truth could come to light. Backstage, Dorian approached Nancy. When did you find the evidence? Why didn't you tell me? Nancy smiled at him and shrugged. You didn't need to know. He narrowed his eyes in dissatisfaction. Nancy chuckled. Anyhow, I hope you know that the internet says the designer is a genius. Dorian's eyes went wide as she showed him several comments on her phone. It had been posted on social media by Gary Blackburn of Player's Journey. I want to take this opportunity to apologize to Brightstar. I especially want to say sorry to their designer. What we did was wrong. Several comments followed Gary's post, and most of them were profuse apologies. The internet trolls who had previously slated Brightstar as shameless began to applaud them for their incredible game and outstanding design. Dorian clutched the phone as if it were a rare treasure. His heart beat faster as he reread Player's Journey's post and the subsequent comments. He realized that he finally had fulfilling work that would bring him the recognition of his peers and others. He felt himself swell with pride. Jonathan used the situation to his advantage. He decided not to kill Caviar and instead used him as bait. He sent him to Cuba to lure Gavin and Alexander out of hiding. But the two men had suffered a massive blow by their failed attempt at sabotaging Brightstar, and Jonathan knew they would keep themselves well hidden. Finding them became Jonathan's main priority. Jonathan sent Norman to Cuba with a few other men under the pretense of needing help with business matters. But in reality, Norman was tasked with locating Ashley. They had searched far and wide, but had yielded no results. Ashley's whereabouts had remained undiscovered. Matthew hadn't given up any clues either and refused to let her go. He made sure that she was well treated and out of sight. When Norman was ready to board the boat bound for Cuba, he noticed that Latham had followed him. He looked at Latham, stunned. What are you doing here? Why did you follow me? Latham had already boarded the boat with him. I want to go with you to find Ashley. Norman had learned about Latham and Ashley's relationship recently, so it didn't come as much of a surprise to him to see Latham there. Are you going to save her? Latham nodded, but didn't answer truthfully. I want to see her. He looked haggard and seemed to have lost weight. 4 days earlier, his father had passed away. The doctor had said his father seemed to have lost the will to live. Latham had arranged the funeral, which only a few family members had attended. Jonathan had only learned about it a day or two after he had arrived home. Jessica had been distraught at the loss of her husband, and Latham had decided to send her to his aunt's house away from the city so that she could be comforted in her time of mourning. He had woken up early every morning and had gone to bed late each night to prepare his company for his absence. He had briefed his most trusted employees on handling his business while he was away. Then, without as much as a backpack, he followed Norman to the harbor. Norman shrugged at Latham. You need to understand that Ashley's location is extremely well hidden. We've had immense difficulty finding her as it is. I don't know if you'll be able to help much. Latham sighed and looked him in the eye. Tell me, Norman, if something were to happen to your wife or girlfriend, wouldn't you do everything you could to help her? Norman suddenly thought about Sydney. Although she had told him how she felt about him, he had to consider his dangerous lifestyle. They were worlds apart, and he had rejected her advances. They had run into each other a few times since then. For some reason, Latham's emotional response had reignited the spark he felt for Sydney. Okay, Latham, you can come with me. Does Jonathan know what you're doing? Latham shook his head. No, please don't tell him either. Norman had never hidden anything from Jonathan before, and Latham knew it. Please, Norman, I'm begging you. Just see it as helping a broken man fulfill his last wish. Norman didn't know what to say. He felt sorry for him, but also didn't want trouble. He thought about it for a while before concluding that he would have to protect Latham if there were any danger, or if they lost control of a situation. He would knock him out and put him on the first boat back to America. He didn't say anything. Instead, he gestured to the captain to depart. Latham watched the mainland disappear as the boat traveled across the dark blue ocean. They arrived in Cuba several hours later. After passing through customs, they disembarked and were met by Jonathan's men. Norman knew that Jonathan had told Matthew about him going to Cuba, so they headed straight to the Davidson sprawling estate. Upon arriving at the estate, Norman and the other men followed Jonathan's instructions, while Latham went to the main house. Theo had failed to regain his prominence in the family, mainly due to the scandal with his sister-in-law, his wife's wishes to divorce him, and because Alexander had run away. He seldom went to the main house anymore, so only Matthew and Frederick were home when Latham knocked on the door. Surprised, Matthew welcomed Latham inside. "I thought Jonathan was coming. I didn't expect one of his friends." Latham cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Davidson, I'm here because I have something serious to discuss with you." He glanced around the room. "Do you think we can talk in private?" Matthew nodded and gestured for Frederick to leave. Only Walter remained behind. Latham took a deep breath. "You already know who I am. Now I fit into the picture, so I'll get straight to the point. I've come to ask if you'd consider exchanging Ashley's freedom for something else." Matthew puffed on his cigar, and a tiny flicker of interest sparkled in his eyes. "I heard that you were married. Why do you still want Ashley if you're already married?" Latham shook his head. "I didn't get married. I want to marry Ashley." Smirking, Matthew put his cigar down in the ashtray. "Young people spend all day talking about everlasting love, but when you reach my age and look back on your life, you'll learn nothing lasts forever." Latham shrugged and looked Matthew in the eyes. "Maybe that's because you never met that special person." He thought of Olivia. They had been the perfect couple. He had also thought he would grow old with her. But after they had broken up and gotten back together, she had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had watched her slowly fade away until she passed away, and it had felt like his entire world had died with her. He had nothing left to live for. He had dreamed about her for many months afterward. He didn't think he would ever meet anyone else to love and care for, as he had with her. But when he had seen Ashley drenched in the pouring rain because she had delivered urgent documents, he had thought about his love for Olivia. He had realized that his heartache had healed, and he was ready to love again. There was also the night in the hotel. Maybe it had been because of the alcohol, but a spark in his heart had been ignited, and a new flame had begun to burn. He had felt as though he had been drowning in a sea of emotions, but his behavior afterward had ruined everything. All he now felt was a deep sense of regret and his intense love for Ashley. Latham realized how foolish he had been to think he would never love again. He knew he would never forget Olivia, and that part of him would always love her. But it was time to move on. Ashley was a good person and had sacrificed a lot for him. He looked at Matthew sincerely. "Matthew, I care deeply about Ashley and can't stand to see her suffer. That's why I came. You've got to let her go. I'm begging you." But Matthew wasn't listening to him. His thoughts had drifted to Nancy's press conference that had taken place earlier. He hadn't thought she could pull it off, but she had impressed him. She reminded him of the woman he had fallen in love with when he was young. He thought it was a pity that his wife had been so much older than he had been when they had gotten married. He had been in his 20s, and she had been in her 40s when their 3 sons were born. Now that he was getting older, he was increasingly sentimental. His sons had their own lives, and he knew it was wrong to expect them to fill his shoes one day. However, the house felt incredibly empty these days. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" he asked Latham. Latham nodded, hoping that Matthew was finally ready to negotiate. "Yes, I'm absolutely sure. take me and let Ashley go." Matthew looked him in the eye. "Okay, suit yourself. I hope you don't regret your decision." "I won't, but I want to ask you a favor." "What is it?" "Don't tell her. I want this to be our secret." Matthew was stunned at first and then smiled. "Don't you want her to know what you did for her? What if I lock you up for years and she meets someone else in the meantime? Won't you regret it? What will you do once you regain your freedom?" Latham thought long and hard about what he had said. He's right. What if she marries someone else? He wondered. But then he reminded himself that she had been kidnapped and taken to this strange country, far away from her friends and her family, and must be feeling scared and lonely. He knew that if she found out that he had offered to give up his freedom for hers, she would never agree to it, and all his efforts would have been in vain. "I don't care. It's a risk I'll have to take." Matthew nodded and patted him on the shoulder. "All right then, I'll make the necessary arrangements." Norman had no idea about Latham's plan and thought he was just trying to get information out of Matthew. So when he returned to the main house, he was shocked to find Ashley there. Latham was nowhere to be seen, however. "Norman, you saved me! How can I ever thank you?" she gushed, running over to hug him. Norman was speechless, but then suddenly realized that Latham must have struck a deal with Matthew. He received a message from Latham just then, asking him not to tell her anything. Norman smiled at her. "Jonathan sent me to take you back home." "What a relief. I can't wait to get out of here." "Are you okay? Did they treat you well?" he asked anxiously. She shrugged. "They were nice to me, but you can imagine how upset I was at being held here against my will. I thought I'd never leave. I still don't know where I am exactly. They blindfolded me when they kidnapped me." "Don't worry. I'll tell you everything on the way back." Norman reassured her. At the office one afternoon, and when he handed it to her, she shook her head and smiled. "No, thanks. I don't drink that stuff anymore." She was extra careful not to consume anything unhealthy if she was pregnant. If not, she and Jonathan would have to continue trying while she was still ovulating. She didn't want to take any risks. There was too much at stake, and Jonathan was really looking forward to becoming a father. She yawned and stretched in her office chair. Then she got up and walked over to the technical team's room. Brightstar was already working on another revolutionary new game. They had reached the critical stage, and everyone at the company was extra careful not to reveal any details to the media. Eduardo and another technical team member, Anissa, carried out a debugging exercise. Anissa's eyes lit up when she saw Nancy. She handed her a virtual reality headset. "You've got to try this. It'll blow your mind." Nancy sat down and put on the headset. Anissa started the game, and before Nancy knew it, she was transported to a virtual world. Nancy gasped when she saw the virtual reality scene around her. She was standing in front of a shopping mall, surrounded by enormous skyscrapers. She looked up to see flying cars in the sky. Her avatar walked through a sliding door and stood in the middle of a marble hall. A female hologram avatar in a miniskirt came up to her and smiled. "Welcome. Please register your name." Nancy gave her the information that had been prepared by the technical team. "Thank you," the female avatar said. "Your ID card is ready. It contains all kinds of data, including your account information. Have a wonderful journey." Nancy's avatar took the card and thanked the woman. She was awestruck and couldn't wait to find out what would happen next. The company had been working on the game, which they called Creation, for several months, and had developed an entirely new concept in the gaming world. It offered players a virtual reality holographic experience that big global gaming companies had only begun to experiment with recently. Eduardo and his team had achieved something that had never been done before. Nancy was sure that creation would be a big hit in the market and make them rich. In the meantime, however, every employee had been sworn to secrecy. Some scene and avatar designers hadn't even seen the game in its final form. Nancy took her VR headset off after a few minutes and gave Eduardo and Anissa high fives. "This is so exciting. I can't wait for the launch." They exchanged proud glances. They couldn't believe all their hard work was about to pay off. 2 weeks later, Brightstar issued a press release announcing the official launch of its new game at midnight that day. VR headsets would go on sale the following day at various stores throughout the country. The internet exploded. No one was expecting the company to launch a brand new game so soon after the last one. There had been no mention of the game until then, although many gaming companies waited until the last moment to publicize a new offering. In addition, the incident with Player's Journey had barely cooled down, so the timing was questionable. The company organized a media event at midnight and created hype among players by asking them to guess what type of game they were going to launch. Many people believed it would be a simple smartphone gaming app because of Brightstar's history. Only a few guessed that it involved a headset and used virtual reality technology. All sorts of speculations floated on the internet, and Brightstar became the hottest topic on social media under the hashtag Mystery Game. Nancy was pleased by all the hype and knew that their latest game would become an instant hit. She was looking forward to midnight when they would finally reveal to the world that they had developed the first ever holographic game. She and a handful of colleagues stayed at the office that evening. There were still many things to prepare, and the technical team had to be on call in case the system crashed after midnight, when everyone tried to download the game. They ordered some pizza and gathered in the conference room to eat and chat. Dorian came rushing in. "How can you guys be so calm? Don't you know our revolutionary new game is about to be released?" Nancy put her index finger to her lips. "Quiet. Not so loud. Don't jinx it. Remember what happened last time?" He remembered very well and had been extra careful to encrypt the new scene design information so that no one could access it, although Nancy had tricked him into revealing the password earlier. "I'm sorry, but I'm so excited that I can't sit still," he admitted. "We only have 3 hours left to go." She smiled and handed him a large box. "Here, this is for all your hard work. I forgot to give it to you earlier." His eyes lit up when he saw it was an autonomous robot. He took it out of its package and activated it. The robot turned its head toward him, saying, "Don't tell me you're my new boss. I'm a lot smarter than you." Everyone but Dorian burst out laughing. Just then, Jonathan arrived. Nancy looked up and thought how handsome he was in his suit, but she tried her best to appear professional in front of her colleagues. She wiped her mouth with a napkin and stood up. "Jonathan, what are you doing here at this hour?" He took her hand and pulled her to the side. "How could I miss this? I want to celebrate this magnificent achievement with you." She smiled confidently. "I think the entire world has been waiting for this moment. Can I try the game?" "Of course." She led him to her office, sat him down in front of her computer, and handed him a VR headset. "Here, put this on. Prepare to be awestruck." She sat down next to him and put on another headset. Moments later, they entered the virtual world. Jonathan was stunned. He had only seen these kinds of games in science fiction films. He had been telling the technical design team about VR holographic games from the very beginning, but had been informed that the technology wouldn't be available for at least 10 years. They created a miracle, he thought. He and Nancy's avatars were standing inside the enormous virtual shopping mall. "Darling, where are we going?" he asked. "Just follow me. Eduardo put tons of money on my account, so it's time to spend it." Their avatars walked over to a fancy car showroom and picked out a flying vehicle. Once they had completed their transaction, they received a notification from the system that their car was waiting outside the shopping mall entrance. Jonathan and Nancy's avatars walked out of the shopping mall and saw a beautiful sapphire blue vehicle parked outside. They got in and flew off. Jonathan couldn't believe how realistic the game was. It was a magical, extraordinary experience that allowed them to control the car and choose their destination. Nancy's avatar put the vehicle into automatic navigation mode so they could enjoy the scenery around them. "This is awesome," Jonathan exclaimed. "Does the car fly itself? Can we just sit back and do nothing?" "That's right. This is so amazing. Do you want to play some music?" Jonathan nodded. "Play some lively music," he instructed the car. The vehicle responded by pumping out a loud, heavy metal song. Nancy laughed. "Is that what you wanted?" Jonathan commanded the car to cover all its windows, and suddenly they were in complete darkness. Before Nancy knew what was happening, her husband's avatar was on top of hers. "Hey, we're supposed to be playing," she protested. "What are you doing?" She wondered how making out in a virtual world would feel. The two avatars' lips locked, and she felt dizzy and lightheaded all of a sudden. It felt so incredibly real that she could barely breathe. "We've never done it in a car, sweetheart. Shall we give it a go?" she heard him say. She was about to surrender herself to him when a thought crossed her mind. "This is my game, so why does he have control?" she wondered. She quickly deactivated her headset and took it off, and her avatar disappeared into thin air with a flash of white light. Jonathan was stunned. His avatar navigated the car to a parking lot according to the instructions he received and climbed out. Nancy was sitting at her desk, looking at him with a huge smile on her face as he took off his headset. "You stranded me. You're gonna pay for this," he teased. He got up, grabbed her, and pulled her onto the leather couch. She tried to protest. "Don't you want to continue playing the game?" "You left the game. It's time to play something else." The others were still in the conference room. "What the heck happened to Jonathan and Maria?" Jasper, a technical team member, asked with a laugh. "I bet they're not even playing the game." Peter kicked him under the table. "Don't go there. Not everyone's a sex addict like you moron." "How many times a day do you think they do it?" Jasper asked. "Stop it." "What's wrong with you? Do you feel uncomfortable talking about sex?" "Leave him alone," Anissa said. Just then, Peter's phone rang. It was his father, Edwin. Peter got up from the table and walked to the corner of the room. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" "Are you still at the office, son? It's late." "I've been busy revolutionizing the gaming industry," Peter told him proudly. He had a good relationship with his father, who had given him a good upbringing, although Peter had turned out to be a bit of a loose cannon. "Oh yeah, I remember hearing about the video game your company is launching," Edwin said. "It has something to do with flying cars, right?" Though he tried to sound nonchalant, Peter could tell he was proud. His father had just returned from a business dinner with some partners who had praised Peter and his technical team for their ingenuity and creativity. He knew his son loved his job and would never go back to Houston. Peter smiled. "Dad, are you calling me to see if you can get a sneak peek of the game?" His father laughed. "Why do you assume that I'm calling you because I want something? Maybe I just want to hear your voice." He paused for a moment before continuing. "But you're right. I do want something." Peter heard the serious tone in his voice. What is it? Have you met someone? His mother had passed away when he was young, and his father had raised him all by himself. This is not about me, Edwin said somewhat impatiently. It's about you. You're almost 30 and still single. I was chatting with a business partner the other day, and he has a daughter who's also single. Not this again, Dad. I'm bright, talented, and good-looking. I don't need you setting up blind dates for me. I'm perfectly capable of finding a woman on my own. If that's the case, where is she? The business partner I mentioned is Louis, the chairman of Obsidian Industries. His daughter is smart and incredibly beautiful. He showed me pictures. Peter was stunned. Are you talking about the Porters? Yes. Do you know them? The daughter's name is Ashley. She lives in New York City with her brother. Peter was speechless. After a while, he finally said, So you told Louis that I'd go on a blind date with his daughter? Son, our business is expanding, and I have good connections. If you end up marrying this woman, Obsidian Industries may consider operations in Houston, which could be a big deal for us. And who knows, maybe someday you'll take over their company. In any case, my company will certainly be yours in due time. What if she doesn't want to go out with me? Peter asked. Louis is sure he can convince his daughter, and I told him I'd talk to you. We think the two of you would be a good match. Peter stared out the window while he considered his father's proposal. Do you really want me to get married? What a stupid question. How could I not? Think about your mother. She would want you to settle down and be happy. Peter reluctantly agreed. Okay then. His father was pleasantly surprised. So you agreed to go out with her? I'll go out with her once, Peter told him firmly. I'm sure you'll like her. Don't be too quick to dismiss the possibility of something long-term. I'll talk to Louis and set it up. After he said goodbye to his father, Peter stood by the window as countless thoughts raced through his mind. Jasper came up to him, whispering excitedly. Did I just hear you agree to a blind date? Peter was in no mood for jokes. I don't want to discuss this with you now. Can we talk about it later then? Jasper asked. Just tell me if she's good looking. How old is she? Where is she from? I'll tell you when I meet her. Some others in the conference room overheard their conversation. Is this for real, Peter? Eduardo asked. Did you get roped into a blind date? Just be careful, Mark warned him. Don't get pressured into marriage. It's not for everyone. You need to consider your options. Eduardo laughed. Listen to the expert. But he's right. You need to take things slowly, Peter. See if the two of you are compatible. And if not, don't force it. Peter nodded. He remembered meeting Ashley for the first time 10 years ago. He and his father had gone on a ski trip, and they had lost each other on the slopes. He had been stranded with an injured leg and no cell phone. That was when Ashley had shown up in a tight ski suit, looking adorable. She had offered him a snack and had called his father on her cell phone. They had talked while waiting for Edwin to show up. It was unusually cold that day, and her nose and cheeks had turned red. He had insisted that she go back to the lodge to warm up, but she had refused to leave him there, telling him that it would get dark soon and he had no means to contact anyone. What if your father can't find you and you're stranded here for the night? He had asked for her social media username so he could follow her, but she had said that she didn't use social media much. He had instead asked if she gamed and what name she used, and she had promised to contact him on the gaming platform. Peter's father had eventually shown up, grateful for Ashley for keeping his son company. He had even invited her to dinner, but she had politely declined. The day after they had returned home, he had sent her a friend request on the gaming app, which she had immediately accepted. However, he had discovered that she spent very little time online. He thought about her for the next few years, and kept waiting for notifications that she had posted something on her profile or had messaged him, but nothing came. Everything after that was a blur. He had dated several women and had forgotten about Ashley until he discovered she was playing Brightstar's video games under the gaming name Foxy. All his memories of her had come flooding back, and he had decided to add her as a friend on the game so they could team up and fight monsters together. He wasn't sure how he felt about her, but enjoyed chatting and playing online games with her. A few weeks ago, when they had gone on the hunting trip, she had sat down on the grass next to him and had asked him for pointers about the game, unaware that he was the person she had been playing with online. He remembered feeling excited sitting next to her, although he had been aware that there was something between her and Lathong. He had shrugged it off, recalling how eager she had been to help him that day at the ski resort. Thinking about her now, he felt slightly nervous about their date, but was also looking forward to it. He decided to take out his cell phone and message her. "Hey, Foxy, are you online now?" Ashley was pleased to see the message. Ever since she had returned from Cuba, she had been online every evening. "I am. Do you want to play Galaxy Fortune?" "What a coincidence. The name is similar to your gaming name." He laughed and sent his reply. "Okay, you're on. Let's meet at the Star River Valley." He checked the time. It was 10 o'clock, 2 hours before the launch of Brightstar's new game. All of the offices in the company's building were brightly lit, and passers-by looking through the large windows could see the festive atmosphere inside. Nancy was exhausted as she looked up at the wall clock. "Another 2 whole hours to go until the media gets here," she thought with dismay. "I wish we had organized the event earlier in the day." She sat up on the couch and buttoned her blouse. "Jonathan, I think I should go back and join the others." He patted her belly affectionately. "Are we pregnant yet? We've worked hard enough." She shook her head. "I have no idea. It'll happen eventually, I guess. I just need a break now." "Nonsense." He pulled her back onto the couch. "Let's make the most of this evening. We have plenty of time until midnight." Nancy felt like screaming. Sometime before midnight, Jonathan took a shower in her bathroom at the office and got dressed. He grinned at her as he came out. "Well, do you think we succeeded? I have a good feeling about this." He hugged her as she rolled her eyes. She was getting slightly annoyed with him and was shaking from sheer exhaustion. "Come on, get dressed," he said. "You have 10 minutes before midnight. You can rest later. I'll leave it to you." She buried her face in her hands. "I want to go with you. It's not fair. How come you get to go home?" She wished she had told him the media event was earlier. He had deliberately stayed with her until the very end. He kissed her on the forehead. "Come on, don't be like that. You're a professional." She finished dressing, and they walked to the reception area. "I'll go outside and see what's going on," he told her. She looked at him weakly and forced a smile. A few minutes later, at midnight on the dot, she and her colleagues greeted the media and released creation for the world to see. Nationwide, stores were busy putting the VR headsets for the game on display. Millions of gaming enthusiasts logged onto Brightstar's homepage to see what all the fuss was about. When they discovered it was a virtual reality holographic game, they lined up outside the shops to be the first ones to purchase the headsets. The $400 VR headsets weren't cheap, but fanatic players who had been waiting for this moment didn't seem to care. After all, Brightstar was the first company globally to develop a holographic online game. There would always be people who were prepared to spend thousands of dollars on their pastime. But the gamers who bought Brightstar's latest game, Creation, couldn't believe what they found when they activated their new virtual reality headsets. The images they saw were like scenes they had only ever seen in science fiction movies. The graphics were so realistic that it felt like they were truly taking part in the creation of a new world. Only half an hour after the product went on sale, the first rave reviews started to come in. People exclaimed in excitement that they had never seen anything like it. They had never imagined being able to play such a profoundly realistic game of world creation in their lifetime. Soon, every social media platform was buzzing with comments relating to the newest game on the market. The news didn't go unnoticed by the sharp-eyed reporters who hadn't been lucky enough to be invited to the launch conference. They rushed out to get their own copy of the game so that they could be the first to write an official review. Copies of Creation began to fly off the shelves from Seattle to Brussels and everywhere in between. Nancy waited until the first reviews came in, but then she couldn't stay awake any longer, and she fell asleep with her head on her desk. When she awoke some hours later, she found herself in her own bed. She had no recollection of leaving the Bright Star Tower and no idea how she had gotten home. She yawned and went to find Jonathan. He hadn't yet left for work, and she found him sitting at the kitchen table reading a newspaper. The sunlight shone around his head, and she thought he looked exquisite. He looked up at her as she headed toward him. "Hey, babe. I didn't expect to see you up and about so early. Why don't you get some more sleep?" Nancy had dreamed about the product launch all night, so when she had woken up, there was no way she could have gotten back to sleep. She was anxious to know what had happened after she had fallen asleep in the office. She shook her head. "How was it over at Bright Star?" "Come and take a look at this." Jonathan waved at her excitedly. She stood behind him and looked over his shoulder at the newspaper. "There is a full-page spread all about the product launch," he said, pointing at the open page. Nancy read a few lines, and her face broke into a huge grin. The media was praising her product and saying it was the future of gaming technology. She scanned the remainder of the article and then picked up her phone, which Jonathan had placed on charge overnight. She was startled to find that she had dozens of missed calls and hundreds of text messages from people who had tried to call to congratulate her. She recalled that the situation had been similar when they had launched their previous game and had outed Player's Journey for plagiarism. Player's Journey's popularity had fallen since then, and Bright Star was at the top of the gaming industry. Most of the messages were from her colleagues, but she had also received requests from all the major media outlets for interviews. It seemed that they were all vying for a chance to drop an exclusive with Nancy and her team. The attention was phenomenal, and she was a little shocked by it all. She chose a few of the top international outlets and told her assistant to arrange the interviews. Then, she browsed the company's group chat and the hundreds of messages that had been posted overnight. She couldn't read them all, so she selected a few. It seemed that, other than Peter and his core research team, who knew what the launch meant for the company, most of the employees were stunned by the instant success and wondered if it was all a dream. Some had even checked the date to make sure they weren't being tricked by an April Fool's joke. Nancy read the messages and social media posts from employees, claiming to be proud and privileged to work for Bright Star, and a thrill rippled through her. She checked her own social media accounts and found 2 pages that were devoted entirely to Bright Star's latest development. One talked about how the kind of technology used in the virtual reality holographic game could be used in the medical field, and the article's researchers were eager to contact Bright Star in the hope of renting the patented technology. Nancy put down her phone, her mind in a spin, just as Jacob came downstairs to join her and Jonathan in the kitchen. "Hey, congratulations, sis," he said with a broad smile. "Mom and Dad would have been so proud of you if they could see you now." Nancy hugged her brother. "I guess so." Breakfast was ready, so the 3 of them sat down to eat. Nancy drank a mouthful of orange juice but immediately found she couldn't drink another drop or eat a thing. Her stomach was so tense from the excitement and the pent-up anxiety leading up to the product launch that she realized she actually felt sick. She put down her cutlery and rubbed her temples. She sat at the table while Jacob and Jonathan ate, and then she got ready to go into the office. Everyone would be expecting her to go in, even though she felt like going back to bed. She made her way to the office building, and as she walked past a gaming store near the office, she saw a long line snaking through the door and along the street. She typed a message into the group chat. "Why is there a massive line outside the nearby store?" Within seconds, a reply came back from one of her employees. "All the stores are sold out of the holographic headsets. The last batch in the warehouse was transferred out and placed in the main store this morning. Everyone wants to get their hands on one." Nancy smiled surreptitiously and looked in amazement at all the people who were eager to purchase one of her products. Her chest swelled with pride. "I'm a success," she thought. "Now, I can finally go to Cuba with Jonathan and be treated as his equal. I might not come from a wealthy family, but I've worked hard to achieve my success, and I'm surrounded by people who actually care about me." She thought about Harold Sloan and how he might react if he knew Maria was his daughter. Would he be happy? She felt that Maria deserved some fatherly love. She made her way into the office and was met with loud cheering and applause. She smiled at everyone and thanked them for all their hard work, but she didn't have time to stop and talk. There was work to be done. She knew that the first few weeks would be filled with continuous interviews, as well as all the work involved in ensuring that product supply continued to meet demand. Everyone got straight back to work, and no one complained. The holographic game success gave every employee the motivation they needed to deliver over and above what was expected of them. Some of them even canceled their planned vacations so that they could continue to be part of the success story. A few days later, Brightstar became one of the most successful companies in the U.S., and its shared price soared. Nancy's personal wealth increased tenfold in one day. Seeing her name on the country's rich list was surreal. She couldn't help feeling proud of her achievement. For the first time, she could stand shoulder to shoulder with Jonathan. She knew that she still had a long way to go, but she had finally made it into Jonathan's world of business success. He had also been exceptionally busy lately. The Sumoku Corporation had released a new vehicle, and he still had some matters to attend to with the Davis Group. So he had been quite tied up. A month or so after the launch of Nancy's virtual reality game, he took a business trip to Seattle. Nancy had decided to take a well-earned day off, so in his absence, she arranged a shopping trip with Esther. The two young women were famous in their own way, but not so famous that they were mobbed by everyone who saw them. Some shop assistants and customers in the mall recognized them and asked for photographs, but mostly, they were able to shop without being accosted. It was the middle of autumn, and the shopping mall was filled with autumn and winter clothing. Nancy spotted a sky blue trench coat, which she instantly fell in love with, so she took it to the fitting room to try it on. She entered the only available fitting room and locked the door behind her. She was in her own world and was oblivious to her surroundings. But just as the lock clicked into place, she sensed that she wasn't alone. She froze with her back to the intruder and cursed to herself as she remembered that she had left her purse, which contained Zara, outside with Esther, so she couldn't secretly press the alarm. Before she could react, she felt the cold, hard edge of a blade against her throat, and her heart leapt into her mouth. She glanced through the corner of her eye at the mirror on the back of the door and saw a sinister-looking face staring back at her. "Don't speak," the man said threateningly into her ear. His voice was low. "Follow me, or I'll kill you." Nancy didn't want to risk finding out if he meant what he had said, so she didn't struggle. She followed the man through a hidden door in the fitting room to an adjoining suite. She took in her surroundings and got the feeling that the room had been modified somehow. In hindsight, She had also had an inkling that something hadn't been quite right inside the store earlier. Going shopping with Esther had been a last-minute decision, and she couldn't understand how her captors had made the necessary arrangements to deal with her in advance. They had somehow predicted that she would be in that store at that particular time. From the second fitting room, she was quickly transferred to a dark room beyond. It occurred to her that she had seen the sky-blue trench coat somewhere before. She racked her brain and remembered seeing a billboard advertisement on the main street. At that time, she hadn't thought too much about why a high-end designer would need to advertise in such a way. But the more she thought about it, the more unusual it seemed. The coat was exquisitely made from top-quality fabric, and it dawned on Nancy that there was nothing else like it in that particular store. The coat was bait, she thought, trying not to panic. My subconscious saw it in that advert, and it made me go into this shop. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. As the reality of the situation dawned on her, her assistant tied a blindfold over her eyes, and she felt the sharp sting of a needle being inserted into her neck. A moment later, she fell to the floor, unconscious. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself tied to a chair on the top floor of a building. There was only one window in the room, and when she looked through it, she realized that she was in a part of the city she didn't recognize. The blindfold had been removed, but her hands and feet were tightly bound, and her mouth had been sealed shut with a strip of duct tape. She had no idea how much time had passed since she had been abducted. Although the building wasn't particularly tall, she couldn't help thinking that she would probably break some bones, or even die, if she were to fall from it. She desperately hoped that wasn't going to be her fate. She looked around the room and saw that the only exit was guarded by two stern-looking men. Nancy felt a cold chill run through her spine, and she shivered. Just as she was taking in her surroundings, the door opened, and someone entered the room. It was Alexander. Nancy saw the scar on his forehead. He had acquired it when he had escaped from prison. It gave his otherwise handsome face a malevolent look. He strolled slowly toward her and looked her in the eye. "Hello, Maria. I guess you're wondering why I've brought you here. Well, I'll tell you. That husband of yours forced me to do it. I've got you in the palm of my hand now. I wonder how he feels about that." He let out a sinister chuckle and took out his phone. He made a video call to Jonathan, who picked up instantly.